Again, good to see everyone. This is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn. I'm back teaching today's class. And we have a very interesting topic today. I'm going to talk about statics and dynamics, two sort of opposite areas of chess that you will get a sense to see from the two example games I've prepared for you. One is an example on a static game, and the second is a more sharp dynamic game. So before we even start, who wants to volunteer and explain to me or to everyone the difference between statics and dynamics? If you've heard this concept before, okay, you can just type it in the chat. It's pretty simple, but maybe not super easy to explain in one or two sentences. Okay, you can just type your answer in the chat like we typically do. You have heard of this as an exercise. Okay, anyone else? Statics and dynamics? And what is the difference between them? Okay, let's see what James says. Yeah, very good. Static play is something that can last for a long time. Yep, and dynamic is something you need to act. That's a perfect summary. I love it. The difference is time, right? The difference is time. And in chess, time could be important, especially when the game is very sharp. Everything is dependent on one or two moves, right? But certain positions, you can sort of relax, sit back, and play slowly. So we're going to talk about that through practical examples. So I don't want to bore you with definitions and theory. I want you to sort of jump right into the games. And the first game is between Gukesh and Matthew Cornet, French grandmaster. Funny enough, both of them are rated very similarly. Gukesh is the super talent from India. You guys should probably know him better than I do. He's your age, right? He's this prodigy from India, very strong grandmaster. And yeah, so you might already seen his games. What really shocked me is he's what? I don't even know how old he's in this game. Probably what, like 14, definitely no more than 15 or 16. But he shows very much adult level understanding of statics and just kind of long-term ideas. And the second game is a little bit different, and we'll get to the second game. But these are the two games I really want you to focus on today. Try to guess the moves, as I'm going to be showing you the moves, asking you questions. And then at the end of the lecture, basically, we're going to talk and compare between statics and dynamics, what you've learned from the two examples in practice. So let's start. So the opening begins more or less as a reversed opening with knight f3, d5, g3. So right, he's not being very ambitious with white. He's just going for some kind of ready type of setup. Knight f6, bishop g2, c5. So black is playing the most principal move. He's like, you're giving me the free center, I'll take it. And I said the word reversed opening. That's going to be a hint to one of my next questions. So pay attention. e6, c4, and here the most principal move is, of course, seize the center with d4. So for those of you, this may already be familiar, this famous opening with reverse color, but let me play e3. King's Indian, well, not quite. Let's make a couple more moves. It's not King's Indian attack, and it's not King's Indian defense. It's a little bit different. d3, there we go. All right, people are definitely picking up. It's a reversed Benoni. So you already answered before the question then popped up. What opening is white playing, and what are the plans? Actually, I misspelled what are the plans. So what are the plans for both sides? And why? We know that Benoni opening as black is supposed to be quite dangerous for black. But why is he playing this with white? Shouldn't be just as dangerous as white. And if not, why? And let's talk about this. So yeah, who wants to give some answers in the chat? I'll take answers from everyone. We have a free tempo. All right, but that's an interesting argument about tempo, because I thought that this is going to be a static game example, and now the tempo is a more of a dynamic thing. So This is going to be an interesting discussion today between statics and dynamics. Symmetrical and reversed openings are usually static, but asymmetrical openings are more sharp. That's an interesting statement there. I like that. But I guess the question from everyone, including myself, why are reversed openings are usually static? What about this extra tempo for white? Isn't Benoni supposed to be this really cool sharp opening? Here we have a reversed Benoni. So who has some thoughts on that? Yeah, Benoni is dynamic. That's what I thought too, right? James is saying Benoni is dynamic opening. And why we're talking about statics? This game is all about statics, actually. Who can tell me why we're talking about statics when we talk about reversed Benoni? Interesting. So one of the ideas is to play for this b4 push. So yeah, people are definitely picking up on that. So yeah, everybody knows in the reverse Benoni, right? So the point is we're going to play on this side of the board. And one of the plans is to get b4 going. It's not easy, right? a3, a5. We do have a majority on the queen side. You guys are correct. Okay? You guys are definitely correct. But it's not going to be easy for white to execute this b4 push. Black is going to play a5. And black is going to try to develop the f8 bishop, maybe play e5 if he can, and just try to take over the center. All right, so now that we kind of know the general ideas, before we actually start making moves, now what is the value of a tempo? Why is a tempo important in this reversed opening? And one of the key ideas that you guys may know from the Benoni is that in the Benoni structure, your pieces are cramped, right? Especially this knight on b1 and the bishop on c1. They're fighting, they want to get developed, but sometimes if the knight goes to d2, it's going to block the bishop. If this knight goes to d2, it's going to block the knight and the bishop. So one of the problems is space, right? Space for your pieces. And here, the extra tempo is exactly how white solves that problem. So in this position, bishop d6 is the most common move. White plays bishop g5. Without bishop g5 plan, none of this would be working. Believe it or not, trading this bishop for the knight is essential. If you remember reverse, black often does that, right? If you think about reversed, the actual Benoni, and a lot of times h3 is played. So again, for those who are able to visualize sort of the reversed idea, the regular Benoni. So it is essential for white to trade the bishop for the knight. But then you're going to tell me, but hold on a second. Aren't you giving up a long-term static advantage of the two bishops? Well, let's take a look. He is giving up. So not only does black have more space, right? Potentially, especially with that pawn and this coming up, he's got the two bishops. So what is going on? Isn't this just statically bad for white, guys? So somebody's saying static, maybe because of the majority in the queen side. So yeah, this is not super easy to answer this question. On one hand, black has the two bishops, right? More space. But on the other hand, white does have the long-term majority on the queen side. What is more important? And the bishops may not be as important yet because one knight wants to come to e4, right? And this bishop is still kind of stuck. So yeah, this is a really interesting observation. Good job. Yeah, you guys are definitely paying attention. So now we're going to probably divide into two categories. Some people will really prefer black here, and some people will prefer white. So I just want to see how many of you would prefer black in this position, how many would prefer white. You can just type in the chat so I have an idea. I guess we can set up a poll. Of course, don't set up a poll. I don't know. or Greg. But I don't think it's that important. I just want to get a general feel. Interesting. A lot of people are saying white. Some people say, yeah, queen e7, f5. So to me, it feels like majority of the people are preferring white. Interesting. And I guess statically, we think black has an advantage, right? If black has a static advantage of the two bishops and more space, why are people taking white? Yeah, some people are taking black, but most people are taking white here. So why is it that a lot of people are taking white here? And there is no right or wrong answer, by the way. This position is playable for both sides. Half open e-file. Ahead in development. Yeah, black doesn't have any clear, strong plans. Yeah, I agree. It does feel like it's much easier to play as white. We know the general plan, right? We can try to execute this b4 push if we can. And we have the e4 outpost. We have better development as white. But funny enough, we are going to try to get a static advantage as white out of this, even though it feels like more of a dynamic edge right now, because white does have a better development at the moment. So let's see what happens next. Knight bd2, very easy move to predict. Black says, well, I don't really want to allow knight e4. Looks kind of annoying. Queen e7 is played, so he's getting ready for knight e4. a3, well, easy to counter, super easy to counter for black. a5, of course, you have to play a5 to stop b4. And now at this point, you may realize that the plan of b4 is out of the window. You just can't get b4 as easily without sacrificing material. So what does white play here? Queen a4 doesn't really do much, although it is an interesting move with idea b4, but it looks a little risky after bishop d7. Yeah, it looks a little risky getting the queen exposed. Knight e1, c2, rook b1 is an interesting plan, but the problem is it's a little too slow, and maybe black can get counterplay. And here, Gukesh is proposing a really cool idea. The way he played, I really like it. He plays knight e4. All right, so the pressure is on the d6 bishop. Black continues with his strategy, maintaining the bishop pair, threatening f5 at some point. The knight is not super stable, guys, on e4. And here, I really think the next move is very instructive. c5 exclam. Only a few games are played with this move. Now, most people prefer the move b4, which is a very dynamic way of playing this opening, right? We know Benoni is dynamic. Reverse Benoni got an extra tempo. Why not sack the pawn? But surprisingly, black may not want to take the pawn. Pawn takes, rook takes, queen takes. f5 is really strong. So now after the knight moves somewhere, black can just castle, and he scores extremely well. If you look in the database, you look at the statistics here, castle scores 44% for white, which is not good if you're white, right? So this is just not pleasant position. So interesting, playing the logical way, I mean, b4 is your plan, right? Is not scoring well here. Funny enough, right? Counterintuitive, I would say. Instead, playing for statics, the move c5 is the right way to go. Although you may wonder, why is c5 playing for statics? And you're going to see shortly how he's going to try to fight for the static advantage with a pawn sacrifice. Castles, knight f d2, logical move, f5, and here we go, guys. Knight d6. He makes black take the knight. You don't want to live with that knight on d6. Takes, takes, takes. And my question is, why did white just sacrifice a pawn? You're not going to get it back anytime soon. You just gave up a pawn for no reason. Let's see what people will say here. f4 comes now. Well, okay. Long-term open bishop on g2. Okay, but still, a pawn is a pawn, right? You have a bishop on g2, but black has an extra pawn. Black is going to play bishop d7, right? Connect the rooks. Maybe play for e5 or b5 and try to convert the extra pawn. As a matter of fact, it feels like the extra pawn is a long-term advantage, which is a static advantage, right? Oh, you don't really want to take on c6. Yeah, you really value that bishop. You only take on c6 when it's very concrete. Okay, so people are proposing interesting options here. Knight c4, queen c7, rook c1, rook e1. Yeah, so I think you're getting closer, guys, to understanding this position. I like it. So let me show you what happened in the game. Most of you have gotten the right ideas. Knight c4 is the right way to start. Queen c7 is played, and now rook e1. Yep, you guys proposed taking over the half open and open files. Here we go. Here we go. We are taking over. Okay. Black plays bishop d7. Here comes rook c1. Notice that white simply is playing chess. He just gave up a pawn, right? And he's getting this long-term compensation. So he's kind of playing in a very relaxed style. Psychologically, it may be quite difficult for a lot of you just give up a pawn for no clear way of getting it back. For example, how many of you feel uncomfortable just giving up a pawn like that? It's okay to share if it's uncomfortable to be white. Me. I'm getting a lot of people saying me. That's good to hear. And some people say not me. So that means you are quite confident in your ability with the pawn down. Yeah, this is not obvious, I have to say. It is clear that it does feel like white gets some counterplay for the pawn, but still a pawn up. Yeah, and you want to try to get it back. So the key word here is patience. You have to be patient as white. And the whole strategy from now on is stopping black's counterplay, right? You're using your better pieces to completely stop counterplay and put black on the defensive, right? Think about it. Black has no counterplay. b5 is really ill-advised with the queen on c7 weakening that knight. e5 is going to lose a pawn. So if he can't play b5 nor e5, can't move this knight, can't do much with that bishop, now you're getting the bigger picture of the problem for black. Black is some kind of paralysis, right? Well, queen c7 is not that bad. It's a theoretical move. After all, you got to protect b6, right? So rook a6 was played. Very clever move, by the way. Maybe this is all part of his preparation. I would not deny that because these moves have been played before. And my next question is, how can you improve white's position? So this is quite important. The next move is quite important, and I really feel like the next move separates the good players from the great players. Meaning that to think of the next move for white, you really have to understand positional chess and strategic chess on a totally different level. So let's see what people are proposing. a4. I don't really like a4. b4 square gets weakened. f4, not a bad idea. Not a bad idea. Bishop takes e6. I don't know. You really have to be careful about giving up that bishop. Okay, knight e5, logical move as well. h4, interesting idea to try to get the pawn on h5. Although in this specific case, there's really nobody to anchor on f4. If you had a knight on f4 and go to g6, that would be great. But yeah, that's an interesting idea. And again, try to come up moves for white, not for black, guys. It's white's turn here. Yeah, so several people are still pointing to this f4, which is not a bad idea. And I wonder how many of you are going to be shocked by the move that was played. Rook e2. Yeah, good job, Royal. Double exclam. I just gave this move a double exclam for a reason. Who got that right? We got at least one person got that right. white doesn't commit any of his pawns. So f4, I feel like, is a really great alternative. I don't think you should be denied credit if you propose the f4, fixing the f5 pawn, getting yourself the outpost. But the point of rook e2 is really subtle. And the idea is that you have lots of flexibility. You can play queen e1. You can swing the rook to the c file. You can still play f4. So what is a sign of a really good positional player? Is to be flexible. Rook e2 is a very flexible move. You're not sure if you're going to play f4. You may not. But you definitely know that at some point you need to swing the rook here, or maybe have an option to play queen e1. And this is a way to really post super, serious pressure on black. So black is staying in the game. He's playing according to his plan. Rook e8, just overprotecting the pawn. Queen e1 is played. By the way, he is paying attention to this e5 break too, right, guys? So we really are putting pressure. Queen b8. So finally, black says, you know what? I don't want to deal with the c-file pressure. I'm going to get out of the pin. And white says, now it's time to play f4. I've seized the e5 outpost. All right. So you could have gotten to this position if you started with f4. So f4 is part of the plan. Okay. But don't play bishop takes e6 nor a4 as white, because that does weaken your position. Let's keep going. b5. Well, sooner or later, black, that's the whole point of rook a6, queen b8. Sooner or later, black wants to play b5. White was ready for that, though. White simply plays knight d2. It feels as though white's getting pushed back, doesn't it, guys? It feels like black has made more progress. Queen is no longer pinned. The rook is protecting the knight. This b pawn is putting some pressure. E pawn is well protected by the bishop. Yet, surprisingly, it's actually not easy for black to activate his pieces. Once again, the rooks e8 and a6 are purely defensive. The knight on c6 has really no good outpost. In an ideal world, you want it on e3, but it's e7, d5 is kind of not easy to execute. Bishop's covering d5. And yeah, c5 is a little weak, so you may already wonder, right, where the knight is heading. So great positional players are very, very careful about pawn pushes and very, very good about activating pieces to outposts. So in the ideal world, right, if it's white's turn, we can just do boom, boom, put pressure here and here. White's doing great. So we could kind of predict black's next move. Prophylactic thinking, a4, good idea. And my next question is, well, knight b3 idea is taken away. What are we going to do? Again, difficult decision. Can you guess white's the best move? And what did white play in the game? Yeah, people are really bishop takes e6. I'm really keen on giving up that bishop for the knight. Okay, be patient, guys. Be patient. Yeah, I see that at the first opportunity to gain the pawn back, right, you want to take it back. But be careful. After all, it's not only about pawns, right? Black is still paralyzed. Don't be trying to gain your pawn back. Yep, Arnav is correct. Yeah, and the answer is b4. Fixing the pawn on b5. It's called fixing the weakness, right? And we are welcoming this. We are welcoming this because pawn on a3 is not super easy to take. We are weakening the knight, and the bishop knight c5 is coming. This position is not pleasant, okay? So this position is not pleasant because knight c5 is coming. So he didn't want to do that. He's already pawn up. He doesn't want to go into these complications. He simply plays queen d6. Simple, solid move. Again, question for white. Why did you play b4? It's not like your knight's coming to c5 anytime soon. And the answer is simple. Knight f3. We've got ourselves another outpost, guys. For those who are paying attention, we may want to get a knight to e5 at some point, right? But we're not in a hurry. We also got the c5 outpost for the rook. To me, it actually does not feel like white is a pawn down. How funny is that? Doesn't it feel funny that your opponent down, but it doesn't feel like it? Again, that's a sign of a great positional player. And statically, we are seeing that statically black is having trouble, right? White just has all these long-term ways to improve his position. Yeah, it's like a positional bind. I agree, James. Yeah, good job. Yeah, you guys are picking this up pretty quickly. So let's see what happened next. How does white make progress? Black simply plays rook c8, rook c2, right? We're going to double. Black's going to bring the rook back. Knight e5, paralysis. But black says, so what? I'm going to go here. Already, guys, a relatively big inaccuracy. Maybe even a losing move. Now, he should have sensed the danger. He should have traded a pair of rooks. He probably didn't like his position. But now, a strong player feels if you're statically losing, go for dynamic counterplay, such as give up your pawn. You've got an extra pawn. Just play rook c7 and rook c2. Who cares about that pawn? It's really complex position, but now with the rook on c2, there's always going to be counterplay. So I'm guessing that black did not even realize he's in some danger. He just kind of plays normal moves here with rook to c7. How can white win by paralyzed black on the c file? So we need total paralysis, guys. Actually, it's kind of a straightforward idea. Yeah, I think most people are getting this. The key is the queen on d6, right? The moment the queen on d6 is gone, the rooks are kind of stuck. How can we get the queen to e5? That's a hint for those who haven't gotten it yet. Yep. So simple chess. Take on c6. And there we go. Queen e5. Pretty much game over. But you got to finish black off. He's going to go back. He's not going to trade, of course. And now there is a winning plan, a really simple winning plan that Gukesh finds relatively easily. Again, sign of a really good, strong player. Very simple plan based on a little tactic using the pin on the C file. And of course, the point of the plan is we want to take on C6 in such a way that after he takes back queen b5, there's no back rank issue. The key is this back rank issue is bothering us. But king f2 doesn't quite do the trick, right? Because then rook c2 intermezzo check. After rook takes queen b5, there's going to be rook c2. So not quite, king f2. Rook c5, rook c2, and then what? Bring the queen around? No, not quite. King. H3, king h2. Very good. h3 or h4. I like h4 a little bit more. And yeah, the problem with these guys is we have a little problem with the back rank. And if rook c6, there's a even bigger problem here with check. So the key is he realized that all I need to do is bring my king to h2 and it's game over. And after h4, black, probably already under a lot of pressure, blundered with king f7. And now, of course, with the king with the 7th rank, it's an easy win. From the black point of view, because we're going to be looking from the black point of view, this is between Josh Sheng, strong international master from California, against Yaro Zheribuch, who himself has probably given quite a number of lectures. Very strong grandmaster, rated 2631. And this is from Continental Open. Actually, this tournament here in Boston area from a couple years ago, just before the pandemic. And I like this game because it was actually shown to me by Josh himself and all the ideas that he saw and he didn't see. And this is a clear illustration, especially for those of you who are getting back and over the board chess. This is a clear, typical fighting chess that you see in a lot of these big Swiss events. One side, grandmaster against a promising IM, lots of fight. Both sides are playing for a win. So let's take a look How does this game differ from the previous example? Now, funny enough, if I show you this opening, you would say, oh, it's going to be boring Caro-Kann, right? E4, C6, probably some static opening. Well, you're going to see shortly it's going to be anything but static. So D4, D5. White plays the most ambitious move, E5. And I think a lot of you guys play E5, right? So this may be interesting. Yeah, I played this as white, somebody says. Good. All right, so black sort of sticks to the main idea, try to get the bishop out. And white plays this very, very topical idea these days, H4. How many of you have seen H4? It's played by a lot of top GMs. You guys may even play it yourself, right? It's kind of like the main line in a way after E5, right? And the point, of course, is you're hinting to this bishop, well, there's no safety for you, buddy, right? G4 is coming, and then H5. So you're kind of taking space on the side of the board. Tile variation, people saying. And now, first major surprise of the game. The main move, by the way, is either H6 or H5. But Jerry Book says, you know what? I'm not going to exercise who knows theory better against this young, promising IM. I'm going to confuse you, my friend, with the move A6. So before we look at A6, let me just show you H5 is the main line. H6 runs into this G4 move, and after bishop E4, F3, there's this E6 pawn sack with attack. So this is important line. And of course, there's bishop D7, which is another line, kind of like the French. Okay, but A6, by the way, E6, of course, is bad, right? Everybody knows that. So we're not even going to talk about the E6. A6, what on earth? Josh Schenk is already out of book on move 4. How interesting is that? We're going to get ourselves a really cool fight out of book on move 4. Yikes, that's right. Interesting. Well, let's jump right into it. People are confused. What is A6 all about? It has been played, but it's a very rare move, guys. Very rare move. So C4 is what he plays. Very thematic. He's like, well, C4 is part of my attack and idea. I'm going to play it. Right? I mean, why? What is this A6 move all about? But now station has changed. E6 now is played. Funny enough, now he can get away with that move because you see, there's bishop takes B1 option. So funny enough, C4 gives black this idea to play E6. So the game enters a very interesting territory right off the bat. Knight C3, logical move. Well, the problem with G4, like I said, G4, you're actually not trapping the bishop, right? Keep in mind, there's always bishop takes B1. Yeah, I can always start with bishop E4, F3, and then I can take on B1. Yeah, and then I can take on D5, outpost. So this is maybe too many weaknesses. So he plays logical move knight C3. Now H5. Interesting idea. So in a way, he is saying to white, what's your next move? Because H5 could be played earlier. So white says, I'm going to play C5. I'm going to punish your move, and I'm going to have a nice hole. Right? So statically, this is your sense right now, sense of danger. This could be quite ugly for black. Right? If white just develops naturally, plays knight A4, and just takes over all the squares, black is going to suffocate. And with a board full of pieces, he didn't even trade one pair of minors. This could be bad. And now everybody's dynamic sense should really kick in. The moment C5 move is played, what should be black's reaction here? Okay, some people are already pointing the right move. And the correct move here is first knight D7, then bishop G5, and now F6. This is the key point. You don't want to play bishop E7. You don't want to trade the dark square bishop and weaken your dark squares. The game is going to get super sharp. Pawn takes, bishop e3. Now you see what's happening. We've got ourselves a beautiful center, and the game is going to explode in a very tactical mess really quickly. So, but first, queen c7. He's not quite in a hurry to play e5. Knight g2, logical move, right? He wants some knight g3, knight f4 ideas. Knight g7, knight f4. And here's the question, which I feel like a lot of you already know the answer, but I'm going to ask anyways. Does black need to defend h5 pawn here? I mean, the theme is here, dynamic chess, right, guys? Who cares about some pawn? e5 exclam. We got to blow open the center. Who cares about the pawn? Well, white says, you know what? All my strategy up to this point has been aimed at going after the h-pawn. I might as well just take it. Buckhouse? Yeah, people want Buckhouse and put knight on c2. But it's not Buckhouse, so we got to focus on real chess here. This is where the really cool dynamic chess comes in. Castle. What do we have here? We have a stranded king right in the middle of the board. Probably not a good idea to go there, right? Probably a little risky to go there as well, right? With this guy here. The center is about to open up. He's really behind in development. Clearly, black has a dynamic advantage. Okay, now what? Let's see what happens. Knight g3. Nice tempo move on the bishop. Bishop h7. He's basically saving the good bishop. Knight a4. White sticks to his guns. He says, you know what? You're not checkmating me yet on the e-file. d4 is well protected. I'm going to overprotect my c5 pawn and hint at the knight b6 idea. How can black take advantage of his better development? Again, the answer is what? Dynamic chess, right? Playing actively. He plays f5. Yes, if you guys immediately came up with f5, you are very good dynamic players. f4 is the idea. So pawn takes e5, knight takes e5, knight b6 check. So what? King b8. And now white says, all right, I see your threats. f4 at some point, maybe d4 at some point. King's a little uncomfortable. I'm going to play queen a4. Get my queen out of that pin if d4 is played. Okay, Zherbuk plays f4. Dynamic chess to the end, right? So he's really blowing open the position with everything he's got. Quite different approach from the earlier game, right? This is just pawn sacrifice to open up files. And bishop takes f4. I mean, you got to do that. There's really no real option. But there is still some pressure. There's a pressure here on the h2 b8 diagonal. The queen and the king feel a little uncomfortable. So black has to get rid of that bishop. He plays knight e2 g6. By the way, also opening the road for that bishop. It feels like black is simply taking over the game, right, guys? White has no development. Bishop e3. Feels like, wow, you're wasting time. Super passive move. d4, of course. Seems like this game is about to be finished. The initiative is huge, right? Bishop takes d4, though. Knight f4. And now, try to be creative genius as white. How can you keep the game going? How can you try to stay in the game? Don't panic, right? Actually, castle long is a little risky. You're walking right into some bishop h6 business. Knight d7 check. I'm not quite sure what the point of that check is. What if I just take rook d7 or something? Yeah. Very good. Bishop takes a6. Yeah, you guys are really good today. Very sharp. This is the only way to stay in the game. Keep in mind, the side with a lot of material can afford to give some of the material back when needed, right? This is a great defensive resource. Black takes. and white simply castles. And now this game becomes a total mess. A total mess, because now who is getting checkmated? I mean, this king is not very comfy either all of a sudden, right? So it's going to get really, really exciting really soon. So king a7, okay, we got to protect at least. Queen takes a6 is coming. Rook a to c1. Logical. Maybe he wants to throw in rook c3 and rook a3. Knight f to d3, logical move. Here comes the rook. Rook g8. He says, you know what? I'm not really worried about rook a3 at the moment. That's why white plays rook d1. Now, actually, Josh told me that he missed knight takes b2 here, funny enough. But it actually turns out to work out quite well. It's like one of those things that knight takes b2 looks like a really horrible blunder, but tactically, it's okay. So knight takes b2 is on the board. By the way, you should not always look on one side on the board. Here, I mean, knight b2 is the first move that pops up. Look at the way to attack the king. Remember, it's dynamic chess. Focus on attack. Knight f3, I feel like, is the right way to go here. White is suffering. Takes, 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 takes. There's some calculation needs to be done, but the attack, trust me, is almost made an attack. You can work this out yourself. So I feel like this is one of those classic situations. You have two promising moves, right? Knight f3, maybe there's a checkmate in attack, or simply win material with knight b2. Feels like knight b2 is the sort of least dangerous for black, right? You can just take and win the material, but turns out it's far from easy. Queen a5. Whoa, wait a second. You're giving up the rook on d1? Black is up an entire rook at the moment, guys. How crazy is this? Right? Really crazy position. But bishop takes, queen takes, and then rook a3 is played. By the way, knight c8, if king here, then check. This is another crazy line. Black does have bishop d6 here. At 3,000 is some kind of forced draw. Yeah, I don't know about that. So this is another crazy line that white, this could have happened. But he played rook a3, logical move. Now queen a6 is a big threat. Here comes the bishop, though. Things are not super simple. Bishop protects the pawn. Knight c8 check. That's the resource. I was just thinking Stockfish would say 0-0-0. Well, you think it's going to be a draw, but there's a twist at the end of the game. I'm not going to give it away yet. King b7, playing for a win. Look at that. Remember I said a grandmaster in a Swiss tournament, when there's a lot of money on the line, will risk it. And yeah, he's playing for a win. By the way, this is, as everyone said, a draw. But black says, why do you have to make a draw? I'm playing for a win. So he's going to take some risk. King b7, of course. That's the only way to play for a win. Queen takes d8, and now bishop b5. Turns out to be a mistake, by the way. Not obvious, but knight takes f2 was a better try. Not obvious, I have to say. This is just a really complex position. I'm not going to even delve into every single detail. You can analyze this all day with engines. Really crazy position. Now, the idea is, of course, some queen e1 ideas. Knight d6. By the way, rook f3 was a better try. It actually was a winning move, believe it or not. Not too difficult move. I'm not even sure why Josh missed it with the idea of just activating the rook. Yeah, not easy to stop rook f7. But yeah, I mean, it's a at this point, I have to say, both players are super short on time. Because imagine on move 4, they were on their own. Yeah, rook f3 would have been big painful loss. Knight d6, though, was played. The game continues. Another mistake, queen takes g8. As I said, time pressure. And I can't really blame Josh for this move, a very logical move. He should have played this line, right? And somehow, I mean, with the king running around like this, it's an incredible move. I mean, it's impossible to figure this out. It's almost inhuman, I should say. And this is believe it or not, agreed. Kind of like a draw position. I'm not even gonna go explain why it's a draw, but it's the only way to a draw. Anyway, so he plays the most human move. Now, bishop c7 was simply winning. There's no counterplay. Like a Semislav Botvinnik. Yeah, you're right, Arna. Instead, he plays bishop c5. Again, logical move. Rook f3. Here comes the rook finally. Queen check. Bishop check. All of a sudden, this king feels a little bit uncomfortable. But rook f7 check. Now, keep in mind, this is move 36. Both players are under a minute or under 2 minutes here. There's probably like delay. I don't think they even had 30-second increment at that point. They just had, I think, maybe 10-second delay or something like that. So it's a huge, complicated position. Both players are in big time trouble. King goes for a little walk. King goes for a little walk. Do you take a draw with king b6 or try to play for a win with king c4? Here's a good question for everyone. What would you do, guys? King b6 to gain time. Clever. But remember, there's no increment. King c4. A lot of brave souls out there. A lot of brave souls with king c4. I would play king c4 in blitz, king b6 in rapid. Interesting. Interesting that you have a kind of different approach to based on which time control. Well, guys, unfortunately, I would have to disappoint you and say king c4 is the losing move. Sometimes you just got to take a draw. Overly ambitious players could lose like this. So, yeah, that's the second time. Remember how I said he could have taken the draw much earlier? But this time it's really going to backfire. And the problem is, after queen f5 check, you are seeing that there's 1, 2, maybe 3 attacking pieces. And the king has to do this. And now what? Knight e4. And that's it. Resigns. So that's how the game finished. Yep. So what are the lessons? What are the lessons from this game? What do you think, guys? Oh, yeah, you're right. There's another idea. Bishop d4. Yeah, who wants to answer this question? Somebody asked a question about bishop d4 block. Yeah, but you got to give me a complete line. I mean, what does rook takes? With some evals, ideally. I would say that a big lesson is to know when to make the objectively right decision, which is to make a draw. Some people, including me, might overplay us here and lose. Interesting. Yeah, I like that. Good lesson. It's always tricky to know what to sell for a draw. Yeah, that's a pretty good lesson learned. There is no mate, really. Yeah, it's not obvious. Yeah, this is a cool idea, of course. Queen f7, check. If king here, then you got this queen a7. This is a really cool idea. So what's the consensus? Did you guys think it's a win here? Should be a win. Yeah, queen f7. We already talked about this queen a7 idea. Yeah, the problem is this king just has nowhere to hide. Black is getting attacked really badly. Right, if king c3, then queen b3. Yeah, that's another problem. Yeah, I think, yeah, king f7, queen f7 looks interesting. I like queen f7. Yeah, there's really no good square for the king. So I think this may be winning. But now, the next question I have, I mean, that was a really good lesson when to play objectively for a win or for a draw, because Black sort of overpressed his hand a little bit. Oh, granted, he was winning earlier, right? Especially with that knight f3 check that he missed right of the middle game. So psychologically, right, when you're going from a really good trend, right, you're going from like a winning trend, it's very difficult to put the brakes on and say, all right, I'm done. I'm gonna take the draw here, take the perpetual. So that's one lesson. What's another lesson? Especially compare this game, dynamic chess, to the static game that we just saw earlier. It's like two different worlds, right? Static chess and dynamic chess. Let's try to compare them. Yeah, very important lesson is to be patient in static positions. Okay? Be patient in static positions and be extremely aggressive and concrete in dynamic positions. The moment you realize that your opponent is not developing their pieces or trying a little bit too many play too many pawn moves, you really have to blow open the center. Remember f6 e5, and then Yarrow did not care about his pawns. He just kept pushing his pawns and giving them left and right. And then I gotta give credit to Josh for that bishop takes a6 and castle kingside, just to keep the game alive. Yeah, so that's a very important difference. Just the pace of the game, you have to sense the pace of the game in dynamic and static positions. And also in dynamic positions, it's almost impossible to be always perfect. The computer is going to be almost perfect because the computer can calculate perfectly. Humans make mistakes, and you saw how many mistakes both sides made, right? White made mistakes, black made mistakes. That's normal. In dynamic positions, the difficulty is so high that the amount of mistakes is much, much higher. Okay, so that's important to remember. My intuition level out of 100 is 0. Interesting. Well, you got to work on your intuition then. All right, so now that we understood the difference between the two games, the next part for you to apply the lessons in your own games, meaning that you have to identify, am I playing for long-term static advantage, right? Or am I playing for sharp dynamic counterplay right away? Sometimes it may switch around. You may start with a simple static position that may get super sharp quickly, and vice versa. Dynamic position may peter out into something more static. But these are the two opposite sides of the coin. Really, really good players can do both. Okay, so yeah, remember that, guys. All right, so I think that's pretty much all for today. I think everyone answered a lot of questions today, which is good. I hope you enjoyed this last game, which is extremely crazy. And yes, you get a little bit different type of commentary. Yeah, yes, sir, Maurice. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, the key is to have a balance, right? You got to be able to in chess, you got to be able to do a lot of things well. If you find yourself, you simply did not understand how on earth did White win the first game, he just gave up a pawn, then to me, you kind of have you got to work on your positional chess and your static long-term sense. But if you felt at home in this crazy position, well, maybe you're really good at these dynamic chess things. And that also plays a key role, because you may play certain openings that are more dynamic and certain openings that are more static. Or even within an opening, right? You can play bishop b5 check against the Najdorf, right? Just to sidestep the Najdorf. Or you can play how Caruana play against MVL with this bishop g5, super crazy poison pawn variation. So really, you got to stick to the style sometimes, right? If you like one style over the other, make sure your openings are matching that. Yeah, you play poison pawn, great. So that means you must love dynamic chess. All right, that's it for me, guys. Thank you very much.